What's up, guys? Welcome back to Metal Building Coach. This is Module 1, the Basics, Session 2, Metal Building Geometry. Let's get into it. Okay, so when it comes to metal building geometry, you really have three main dimensions that you want to focus on. Now, that's pretty obvious, but there's some really important stuff that I want you guys to take away from this. So just real quick, you have your width here, your length here, and your height here. So, that's fairly obvious, I guess. But the big thing to take away from this is that you want to keep it in that order. That's width, length, and height. So moving forward, anytime you talk about your building or you hear me talk about the dimensions of a building, I'm going to be keeping that cadence. So width, length, and height. Now, here's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. So when I'm talking about, or when I say, I should say, a 40 by 60 by 12, I'm referring to a building that looks like this. This would be 40 feet wide by 60 feet long by 12 feet tall. So you can see that's what that building looks like. Versus if I were to say 60 feet wide by 40 feet long by 12 feet tall, I'd be describing a building that looks like this. And this goes for, anytime you describe your building project to anyone in the industry, you're going to always want to go with the width, the length, and the height in that order. And just to kind of go into this a little bit more detail here, I'd say 80 to 90% of the buildings that are done in the industry have a width that is less than the length. So we see a lot more 40 by 60 by 12s versus, a 60 by 40 by 12. So next we've got the wall designations. So this is important anytime you're referencing a certain wall on your building. So the breakdown looks like this. First you have your LEW here, that would be left end wall. Then you have your REW, that's your right end wall. Then you have your FSW, that's your front side wall. And finally you have your BSW, which is your back side wall. So a couple key things here. Obviously the width of the building is labeled as an end wall. So you have your left and your right end wall here. And then you have your side walls, which are the front and back of your building, or the length of your building. So to give you an example why this is important, let's say I'm trying to point out to an estimator or a designer, and I want to call out where I want, say, this 10 by 10 door right here. So I would tell him I want a 10 by 10 door 5 feet from the left end wall on the front side wall. And based off of that sentence right there, he's going to know exactly where to put this door. Or they may ask you something like, where do you want your doors? And you can say, I want them spaced evenly on the front side wall, something like that. So you'll kind of start to see these pop up. So it's a good idea to know what they mean. Again, it's left end wall, right end wall, front side wall, back side wall. All right, so real quick, let's go over EAVE versus peak. So pretty simple here, but a lot of times people get it mixed up. So the big thing that you want to remember is that for the most part, when people in the industry are talking about the height of your building, they're talking about the EAVE height. And what's the difference between the EAVE and the peak? Well, it's pretty simple. Right here, or where the wall meets the roof, that would be your EAVE. So in this example, you have an EAVE height of 12 feet. Then your peak height is obviously the apex, if you will, of your roof. That would be labeled as your peak. So in this example, we've got a peak height of, well, we've got a clear height on the inside of 16 feet 10 inches, and then an EAVE height of 12 feet there. So anytime someone asks you how tall do you want your building, or how tall is your building, they're referring to the EAVE height of your building. So important stuff, basic stuff, but it's good to know this. It's good to lay this foundation now, because later you'll start to see these sorts of things pop up. So one more time, you've got your EAVE here and your peak here. So all right, let's go on to the next section. All right, so this kind of falls in the same category as EAVE versus peak. You'll oftentimes hear, what do you want your roof pitch to be, or what is your roof pitch? And basically, the roof pitch just designates, how much rise there is from the EAVE to the peak. So, I mean, it's kind of best just to show this, so you can see it visually here. So this frame cross section here shows a 1/12 roof pitch. This one shows a 2/12 roof pitch. This one shows a 3/12 roof pitch. And finally, this one shows a 4/12 roof pitch. So this'll, having this knowledge is important, because it can affect the aesthetics of your building. It can greatly affect the cost of your building. And it's just a really important thing to know. So that's all we have for this session here.